Okay, so I wanted to do a quick product review of Alina's new embossing powders. So she came out, I think about a month ago with some embossing powders, and I was slightly skeptical, I have to say, not because of her or anything like that, but just because any embossing powders the rumors I've heard of embossing powders from AliExpress have been that they've been quite rubbish. Now, Alina does do a lot of research when she purchases things to sell in her shop, so I know she does put a lot of time and effort in, but I was still skeptical. So I asked for 3 different colors to try. I picked 3 colors that I had very similar colors of already in my stash, just to kind of compare them and share with you what my findings were. So the first thing I noticed was her awesome branding. So you get the embossing powder like this. It comes with her logo printed on the top, which is lovely. And then also it tells you on the side that it's embossing powder, which is dead helpful because her glitters are very similar. They're slightly bigger, they're a slightly taller bottle, but they do say glitter on them as well. So that is quite nice because if you get confused, it's written on there for you. It doesn't have a color name, which is one downside, so it doesn't say, but she's got a very limited selection of colors, so it's not difficult to work out which is which. So the other thing I noticed was that you have got a bit of a seal, which is in the lid. So when you tighten it on, it kind of helps to seal that product in and keep it fresh for longer. Whereas some of my other ones, like this heated up one, has not got a seal, it's just straight in the bottle. The next thing I noticed, there's about half in this teal one, and this one is full, as well as my gold one. They are full, but the teal one is half full. So I weighed them because it says you get 10 grams of each product. So I weighed them, and it is 10 grams. So each of these is 19 grams, including the container. So I did think, oh, that one has significantly less. But when you're doing it by weight, I know Arteza is the same. They have their mica powders, and some of the mica powders have a lot less in them than the other ones, and that's because of the weight of the product. That's what you're purchasing, is the weight. So they all have exactly 19 grams, which is including the container. So I'm going to assume it's 19 grams because it's 9 for the container and 10 of the product. Okay, so I thought I would give you a quick little demo of the 2 embossing powders, the purple ones, and share with you how they work. Now, I don't know how much is in this one in terms of weight, because Alina's ones are done in terms of weight. So this is 10 grams. This looks to be about 1.5 times roughly what's in here. These ones retail for around £5, and Alina's ones retail between £2 and £3. I think they're slightly more expensive now because of the shipping costs and everything being so crazy. It does pay to shop around and have a look and see what's worth it or not. So the only thing I want to share with you in these is how incredibly similar these 2 are, and how you can get a really nice effect and a really good stamped image. So first off, I use Versamark. This is a watermark stamp pad. This is the one I like to use. I have heard from other crafters that other stamp pads aren't so good. I've also got another one. I can't even quite remember what it was called, but it came with a clear lid, and it's another sort of common one, and I've not been that happy with it. It has not stamped as clear or as crisp. So the thing is with Versamark, I know that no matter how detailed or thick my stamped image is, I will always get a clear image with the ink pad, and I find that makes a massive difference. If you use an embossing ink pad that isn't quite as good, it may give you a different effect as to how effective your embossing powders are. So some embossing powders can be a bit thick, as in the granules are really thick, so when you stamp and sprinkle them on, it gives you kind of a fatter, more exploded looking image. It's not as crisp, it's not as clear, it's not as detailed. So in that case, it's worth looking at your embossing powder and your embossing ink to work out which one, if they're both good or compatible. If you've got Versamark, you're going to have a good image as long as your ink pad is it's still juicy. So I always buy a re-inker when I buy an ink pad, because I hate when my ink pads get dried out. And you don't want them oversaturated, because it does get a bit extra juicy, but you can see that immediately when you stamp your image, and you can always just remove some of it if you need to, if you put too much on. So it is always worth comparing. If you're not getting a good image, it's worth comparing whether the granules in your embossing powder are too fat and they're not giving you a clear image, or if they haven't obviously done the compound right enough or well enough that you're getting a good melting embossing powder, because sometimes you get too much pigment, not enough of the melting aspect of it. So with that said, I know I always get a good image with my Versamark. I love that ink pad, and when it comes to embossing powders, I compare them in terms of how quickly they melt, because if they take ages to melt, it's not a very good sign. How pigmented they are once they're melted, and how well they stick and how fine the granules are, because the fatter the granules, the harder it is to get a nice clear image with a fine detailed stamp. Okay, sorry, that was a bit of a ramble, but I wanted to kind of explain what I look for in embossing powders. I've got this stamp here, is from, I believe, Concord and 9th, and I can't figure out where I put the stamp set, otherwise I'd share it with you, but I believe this is a Concord and 9th stamp. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ink it up. Oh no, I lied. An Embossing Buddy is really, really handy. I have never used anything but one of these ones in the fabric pouch. I've heard people give mixed reviews as to the ones that come with like a little brush that you kind of dab out. I like this one. It's lasted me 8-9 years. There's still plenty in there. It's just filled with chalk, as you can see on my fingers. All you need to do is, sometimes I dab it and rub it around. It removes any static. Now, if you don't use this, which is what I forget all the time, you end up getting like little particles that will stick to the paper occasionally, and you don't get the nice crisp clear image because you get these little dots all around. So once you've put your Embossing Buddy on and you've rubbed it around, you're going to ink up your stamp, and again, make sure your ink pad has got enough ink on it. You will be able to tell if it doesn't. Give it a nice firm press down, and then what I use is one of these trays. It's like a bead tray or an embossing or a glitter tray, and it just kind of catches your embossing powder. So this is the Nouveau embossing powder. This one is called Purple Haze, and I'm just going to sprinkle it over my image and give it a little tap. So as you can see, that went on perfectly fine, and there's very little residue around the edges because I've sprinkled enough, or because I used my Embossing Buddy. Okay, if you ever notice that maybe it's not got enough on, you can just sprinkle a little bit more on, give it a little tap off. Now I've got this heat tool here. This is a Stampin' Up! One. It's got two settings. It's got low air and then higher air. A heat tool is basically like a blow dryer, but super duper duper hot. So less air, more heat. You could use a hair dryer, but you're probably going to blow your embossing powder off before you've actually even got a chance to melt it. So this gets hot with low air, and that's what's good about these. Now there are a huge range of these on the market. It's worth having a look and seeing what is within your budget. They will probably all do the exact same. The only thing that might be a bit different is they may not have the two settings of air. To be honest, I never ever used the first setting. I always use the one that's got more air. And it may or may not have a protective case around your hot metal end. This gets extremely hot. So it's worth having a look. They're not expensive. If you find one that is expensive, have a look, you'll find one somewhere else cheaper, and they all do the same thing basically. I've never seen one that has been rubbish. As long as they get hot with low air, that's all that matters. So what you want to do is heat your heat gun up for probably 1 to 2 minutes to let it get really hot. Mine, I can kind of hear a slight change in the sound when it gets to that point where it's proper hot, and that's when I apply it to my paper. For the best result, which is a bit more time consuming, heat from the back first. It starts to get your embossing powder a little bit melted, which then allows it to adhere the paper better, and when you flip the heat tool around to the front, then you will see that it will start to melt, but it won't blow any of that embossing powder off. So I'm going to get it good and hot first. Now for the sake of this video, I'm going to turn it down onto 1, just so you can hear me a bit better. And again, I'm going to heat from the bottom first. Okay, so I'm going to heat from underneath and get that nice and warm, and you'll start to see it change in a second. And once it starts to change, I flip it over to the top and heat from the top. Now obviously it would probably melt a little bit quicker if I had the air on a bit higher, but I didn't want to drown you out. Okay, and then we've got our embossed image. Now I'm going to do the same with Alina's. The exact same process. So I'm going to get rid of this, pour it back into the bottle. A lot of people use a piece of paper. I find that I knock the paper. I find that the paper ends up with it all stuck to it. I don't get on with the paper. So I use this little tray. My friend Annelle gave me this when she moved. And so she gave it to me and I've loved it and I've used it all the time. So I just do that and then we're like completely clear and ready to go for the next. Now I'm going to do the same process again. I'm going to use my Embossing Buddy, give that a little rub, ink pad on, and then I'm going to take Alina's powder, which looks identical to the Nouveau one. I'm just going to sprinkle it on and give it a bit of a tap. And just kind of give it a little bit more on there. Now, I didn't do too well with my Embossing Buddy, and I've got a bit of that there. And I have wiped a little bit off with my paintbrush, so I'll just stick that back on. And there's the Alina one. So again, I'm going to heat from the back first, and then I'll move around to the front. It starts to melt. I'll move around to the front. And done. So as you can see, if my camera focuses for me, they are identical. There is absolutely zero difference between the two, and they both heated at the exact same point, and they've both left a beautiful image, nice pigmentation. So in my opinion, Alina's embossing powders are very good quality. Then what I did was I took 3 different colors of cardstock. I took black, white, and a pink. I stamped them all using Versamark Ink, which is an embossing ink. And I used my powder tool before I stamped to make sure. And I used this sort of slightly intricate stamp, which I think is a Concord and 9th stamp. So I've done them all exactly the same, treated them all the same. I heated from the back. When it started to melt, I then heated from the front. And these are my results. Then moving on to the pink card. Again, it pops off the card really nicely. Really, really good color. Perfect heating, perfect melting. Really, really nice. And then on the black card, I did it on black pearlescent card. Again, exactly the same. Absolutely stunning, pops off the card. You can definitely tell it's a pearlescent purple on there. Next is my gold. So there's Alina's gold here, and I've got this heated up gold embossing powder. The heated up is slightly darker than Alina's on the outside. Slightly bigger quantity as well, but embossed beautifully. So as you can see here, I've got Alina's one on the right and the heated up one on the left. And they both look fantastic. Really, really happy. Melted quick, melted easily, heated from the back, then brought it around to the front when it started melting. And I'm really happy. Then last, we've got it on gold, on the black cardstock in the gold. And again, same. Looks brilliant. I'm really happy with those embossing powders. Last, I have got this teal color. And again, I can't tell the difference between my Nouveau one and my Alina one. They look exactly the same on the outside, inside, and they have heat embossed the exact same as well. So there's my Alina one, there's my Nouveau one, and here it is on black. I'm hoping my camera is focusing on all these for you. There it is in black. Pops right off the card. Really, really nice. I almost prefer the Alina one to the Nouveau one. Just ever so slightly. Seems a little bit finer of an embossing powder. Then on the pink one, it pops really bright and really bold on the pink cardstock. So we've got the Alina one and the Nouveau one. Again, so happy with the results. And on white. So the Nouveau one is, the Nouveau one is Turquoise Lagoon. And they look fantastic. Really happy with these results. So just so you're aware, this one is called Purple Haze from Nouveau. And the blue one is Turquoise Lagoon. Heated up is just gold. So that's my little review of her embossing powders. I will definitely be picking up quite a few more of these. They have embossed beautifully. I will keep using them. I'll let you know how I get on in a few months' time if any of them have gone off or done anything funny. But so far, so good. Really happy with this new product in her shop. And I can honestly say that it is identical to my name brand expensive embossing powders that I purchased in the UK. Thank you so much for joining me.